Deep underground in Upper Michigan, the scientists of the Aperture Science Facility worked hard under the leadership of Cave Johnson to discover the next breakthrough in science. Through trial and error, they developed outstanding technologies such as mobility gels, companion cubes, and portal technology. But there was one more that became a staple of Aperture and would leave a lasting legacy over the years. What were these marvelous machines? Just how dangerous were they? And what impact did they have on Aperture? Here we explore in the lore and story behind the Aperture Science Sentry Turret. Way back during Aperture's golden years, they were praised for the technology they sent out into the world. As a leading force in the scientific community, they equally earned rivals, one of which being the Black Mesa Research Facility. In these times, they had respect and earned well from the high-quality products they produced and vigorously tested. Over mounds of work and research, the scientists hit a breakthrough when they developed the personality construct, and over the years, they implemented these machines into the very fabric of Aperture and the way it functioned. These machines could feel, learn, and interact with the environment around them, based on the parameters that the scientists of Aperture set for them, of course. As integral parts of Aperture, these personality constructs helped run the factories, accommodation, and testing chambers, just to name a few uses, but these cores still had so much more potential. So, as the next wave of developments began, some of the scientists believed it would be worth integrating them into their devices. Aperture had contracts with the planet's most powerful forces. They were also viewed as a valuable commodity, and so, as the scientists worked away, they decided to dive into the weapons market. Not only could Aperture potentially develop advanced weaponry for the military if contracted to do so, but this weaponry would also come in handy in protecting Aperture and the secret projects they were working on. And so, work began on the Aperture Science Sentry Turret. Developed around a compact fusion core to power it, the Sentry Turret's most recognizable trait are its single red eye and a futuristic, smooth white shell. In its dormant state, these machines appeared innocent, but they were extremely dangerous when encountered. Designed to injure or kill its targets, these turrets were equipped with 2 dual machine guns, which, upon activation, would come out of their shell, along with an antenna. To help find their targets, the technicians developed a laser to peer out of their eye to scan the environment upon activation for several seconds once alerted. But if their target happened to evade their laser beam, they would simply return back to a standby mode after 3 seconds. These projectiles were extremely dangerous and used a new type of storage and firing system also developed by Aperture. In their research, the technicians created the Aperture brand resolution pellets solely to be used by the Sentry turrets. To store these in such a compact device, they developed the shell redistribution chamber to fit as many projectiles as they could. Not only did this save time on refilling ammo, but it also meant that it was very likely that the turrets would not run out of projectiles midway through taking down a target. In a standard firing of a weapon, the cartridge would normally be loaded into a firing mechanism, and after activation, at the end of the cartridge, the bullet would normally fire off into the target. But in the case of the Sentry turrets, the technicians designed a new mechanism, the projectile acceleration cylinder, to fire the whole cartridge or pellet at the target, casing included. In Cave Johnson's words, allowing 65% more bullet to be used. While the efficiency of this could have been questioned during testing, the technicians found that the impact still dealt the damage they required, and to stop this mechanism from malfunctioning or being manipulated in any way, the projectile acceleration cylinder was safely stored within the turret's external barrel. Although these machines had been developed to harm those they came into contact with, they were also fitted with a synthesizer to form music. Each turret appeared to have been fitted with a different sound it could produce upon command, but it was only on a very rare occasion that the turret would make use of this equipment. As personality cores developed into smart weapons, the technicians stored their cores within their shell just above one of their guns. Here, the core would be protected. As stated in their name, these machines had personalities and were programmed to fire at any intruder or target they were assigned to take out. To ensure they did take out who they were meant to, the technicians installed an incident resolution chip that challenged them on whether it was appropriate to fire or not. Alongside this, they were also fitted with an empathy generator and an empathy suppressor. With these, they could choose on whether they portrayed their subjects with empathy, and in these instances, could choose whether they fired or not. In their development, it was noticed that the empathy suppressor had a more prominent influence on the core, and as such, resulted in the targets being shot regardless. With this blueprint of Aperture's perfect sentry turret in place, Aperture created the turret manufacturing facility deep inside of their complex. Within this place, a large operation began to construct the turrets. On their production line, they were put together and processed. For those developed to be used in Aperture, they were manufactured on the production line, while those developed for external use were constructed on specialized benches. Both of these processes completed autonomously by the various other cores of Aperture. With every process of development, there will always be mistakes made, and this was no different for Aperture, where some turrets failed to function properly after being constructed, and these were deemed defective. Aperture Science, although the more comical and eccentric of the scientific companies at the time, still cared about the quality of their products. So, each product went through vigorous testing to ensure they hit that Aperture Science mark of quality. In these assessments, the systems tested that they had bullets, were able to fire them, their laser functioned properly, their eye was working, they were given a whole shell, and in most cases, it was found that those deemed defective also caught fire when using their machine guns. While these tests allowed Aperture to discover and remove the defective turrets, there was another procedure they implemented to ensure that only quality turrets made it through this assessment. In an office of the turret manufacturing plant, a turret scanning system was installed, where the technicians placed a well-made turret into it as a template. Using this, the system then scanned all the turrets on the production track and compared them to the template that Aperture had chosen to be the gold standard. If they failed to pass this check and were deemed defective, they were propelled into an incinerator. As these turrets were sentient and somewhat aware of their surroundings, it was discovered that the defective turrets appeared to be aware of what a defective and non-defective turret was, and would attempt to persuade the human or robot that they had simply made a mistake by marking them as defective. Regardless, the processes in place were smarter and put them in the incinerator. It was also said that the defective turrets also appeared to be smarter than the standard turret, but this could have simply been a design choice by Aperture to keep their chosen turrets grounded and set on the task to hand chosen by their owners, without room for thought for anything else. As the sentry turrets were developed, Aperture had two clear ways to distribute them for use. The first, to be used by Aperture in their facility, and the second, to be sold off into the world to bring in revenue for the company. In this first category, Aperture saw and knew that these machines would have many uses within the Aperture complex for many tasks, so they set them to work. Here, they implemented them into their security system in the enrichment center, where they stood guard of the restricted areas, something Cave had become paranoid about after Black Mesa had somehow managed to match them in their scientific advancements over the years. The turrets also came in handy in their testing of military androids, but following a few incidents at Aperture and security increased and the flow of knowledge decreased, the results of these tests are unknown. Finally, their best known and possibly most terrifying use of the turrets were as an obstacle in the testing chambers for the Aperture handheld portal device, a device capable of creating holes in space from one point to another. These tests were extremely dangerous when the turrets were assigned to be used in them, but testing was important to Aperture, and so they were kept in. For the second category, aside from contracts with the military, the turrets were commercialized and catered towards home security. In their advertisements, Aperture offered their consumers safety from the dangers of the world with their smart turrets that would shoot intruders on sight. To increase their appeal, the marketing side of Aperture made a few changes to the design of these dangerous machines. Within their advert, they offered hundreds of designer colors and styles, such as forest, desert, camo, brick, and table. As they had been using these turrets in the facility for several decades, they were proud of this product, and on the box, they even advertised that the turret spoke. During meetings with product testers before launch, Aperture were told that as the turret was marketed with protecting families in mind, they found that the turret upset children, and so the scientists adapted the personality cores to have a more feminine, calming voice to keep the people of the homes it was purchased for to feel more comfortable even during a burglary. When this feedback was sent to the technicians at the turret manufacturing facility, they discovered that those deemed defective also came with a more masculine, comical voice instead of the soothing one they had developed. As time passed and more test subjects understood how the turrets functioned, they discovered the weaknesses and strengths of the machines. While these test chambers appeared to have been designed to test the portal gun, the effectiveness and factors of the turret were also on show too. From the observation windows, the scientists saw how these test subjects were able to complete the chambers while creatively taking out the turrets. The most common method was either sneaking up behind the turret and knocking it over, or using the portal gun to drop it into a different area. There were even some that made use of the other equipment in the chambers and dropped them onto the machines. In these events, after falling onto their side, the turrets would fire their pellets into every direction they could, just so they could hit what had knocked them down. On occasion, they would even speak to the subjects and forgive them for attacking them, just showing their empathy generators at work. For the more creative test subjects, they were observed to pick up the turrets and move them through one of Aperture's material emancipation grills. These grills were designed to disintegrate Aperture creations upon passing through them, and they worked the very same for the turrets. Others were able to navigate high-powered energy pellets at the turrets, and there were some who even managed to aim lasers at the turrets, which, upon being hit, caught fire and exploded. In each of these moments, the turrets were aware of their surroundings and what they were doing. It may have been their empathy generators, but when they realized that a test subject was in the chamber with them, they asked who was there in an almost childlike wonder, and upon scanning for them, they fired. This could have either been genuine wonder or merely a way for them to gain the sympathy of the test subjects so they could take them out. Over the decades, Aperture and its reputation declined, and on one day, everything changed. A robot that the scientists had been working on, GLaDOS, managed to not only trick them into giving her some neurotoxin, but she also managed to flood the facility with it, where they died one by one. In this chaotic moment, some scientists managed to escape this flood of neurotoxin with some of the human test subjects and travelled into the forgotten depths of Aperture. Here, they found a vault to hide out in, just until they were rescued. But they would not be rescued, as the alien Combine Empire had also taken over the planet around this time, where the humans in the outside world had their own war to fight. As they entered the vault, a scientist programmed a sentry turret to protect them, with its orders to fire at any robot it saw. Miles above, GLaDOS continued to run Aperture and use the turrets in her test chambers against the unwilling volunteers trapped in the facility with her, as they began to work for her without the leadership of humans. GLaDOS ordered the turrets to do her bidding. As personality cores, these of course had their own thoughts and desires, but whenever they began to defy GLaDOS, she threatened them with Android Hell, a place where they would be sent to be tortured and quite possibly destroyed. Although it is unknown if this place was merely another lie of GLaDOS or a real place they were sent to, the idea of Android Hell kept them in line. Many years after GLaDOS's takeover Aperture, one of her test subjects, Chell, entered the turret manufacturing plant and replaced the template turret with a defective one. This effectively left only defective turrets to pass the test. This was a part of her plan to take down GLaDOS, which eventually happened. Additionally, on her journey, Chell came upon a different type of turret and was aware that it was different to its siblings. This one somehow had the ability to make reference to important parts of Aperture's history. Dubbed the Oracle Turret, it referenced a speech made by Aperture's deceased leader, Cave Johnson, about getting mad, and it even spoke of Carolyn, the personality that had been transferred to GLaDOS. After another change-up in leadership of Aperture, Wheatley decided that he wanted to develop his own robots to complete tests for him, and so he created the Franken Turret. These monstrosities were the result of a combination of a weighted storage cube and a turret. In their development, Wheatley believed they could solve tests for him, but he was mistaken. As she continued her journey, Chell also came across additional turrets that had not widely been advertised by Aperture when Earth was still occupied only by humanity, and these appeared to have a secret message for Chell. After GLaDOS managed to regain control of the Aperture facility, she allowed Chell to leave, and on her way up, Chell met the Turret Orchestra. This orchestra consisted of many turrets, each with their own sound adding to their song, Cara Mia Addio. In this song, a large turret, labelled the Prima Donna Turret, sang at Chell in Italian. While this was a spectacle to see, the lyrics opened up a potential mystery for Chell, that is, if she could speak Italian. In this song, the turret sang to Chell as their dear child, a farewell song to a little baby girl. Interestingly enough, some believe this song was a message to Chell from GLaDOS, where they believed that Chell was the daughter of Carolyn, the personality core uploaded to the murderous machine. However, as the facility had fallen many years before and humanity outside had fallen to the Combine, Chell would likely never get her answer. Regardless, the turrets once again served GLaDOS in her endeavours, and as time would go on, they would simply stay within, just waiting for their next adventure, obeying GLaDOS, or they would be threatened with Android Hell. Without a rogue test subject to get in the way of her plans and a whole facility to herself, GLaDOS prepared new tests for a new robotic duo to solve. And inside of these chambers, the Aperture Science Sentry Turrets were placed to challenge those who came across them. Although Aperture and the Sentry Turret may now only be remembered by few of the population of humanity in a Combine-controlled wasteland, their story and hold of the world may be different in the other universes in the vast multiverse. In one of these universes, the Animal King turret managed to take over and demanded worship, while in another, the personality cores of a different Aperture, with the help of an employee, were able to adapt a toilet into a toilet turret, a unique invention that could only have been thought up by the wildest minds. Originally created as a military-grade weapon to work within Aperture Science and to bring in revenue, the Aperture Science Sentry Turret truly made a mark on not only our universe, but also many others. And just maybe, if the Combine do manage to break into Aperture for their technology to further their goals, then GLaDOS and her sentry guns will be waiting, where a new wave of testing will begin. The turrets in Portal are an iconic feature in the series. I remember playing Portal on the orange box on my Xbox 360, and I struggled so much with Test Chamber 16. There were so many turrets, and after beating it and mastering it, now I think it's my favourite chamber. The best part about Portal 2 was that we were given more information about these turrets, why they were created, and eventually what GLaDOS used them for. It is a game full of information, and the turrets did not disappoint. We even got a turret orchestra. This is an extremely memorable part of Portal 2 and opens up so many questions. The big one being whether Chell is Carolyn's daughter. Personally, I don't think she is, but these lyrics have been decoded and some people think she is. My last thoughts about these, I guess, machines is that I felt so guilty when I knocked them down. So, in Portal 1 at least, I did my best to pick them up and aim them at a wall. There, none of us were hurt. This was the lore behind the turrets of Aperture in Portal. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and a comment on your thoughts. It would help boost the video in the algorithm. I do want to say as well that this is my second or third week with a cold and my throat is so tense, so I do apologise if the voiceover seems off. I'm just waiting for my throat to be less swollen. If you would like to stay up to date with everything I do outside of YouTube and fancy some behind the scenes content, then go and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Finally, I would like to thank my patrons and channel members who are on the screen right now, and an extra special thank you to my gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Chicken Guy 791, and Ruben Mendoza. What did you think of this lore? What was your favourite test chamber, and did you just knock the turrets down when you came across them, or did you do the kind thing and face them into the corner so that they couldn't hurt anyone? Let me know in the comments below. Now test subject, enjoy your day. Bye.